class, despite the fact that there are actually quite a few pacifists when they conduct surveys, governments tend to not be very specific. The use of violence, both by the government and by those who may oppose the government and its policies, is very common throughout. And this is especially true in the developing world, including many of our case study countries. Now, I'm going to list out a couple of them and go over a little bit of how violence has played a role. The first one, and one in the news quite frequently, is Nigeria. Nigeria is currently dealing with a very powerful violent apparatus known as Boko Haram. It is a theological based violent action, and the people of this ideology believe that Nigeria should throw off its Western um, ideals and education and instead adopt an extreme version of Islam under a caliphate or religious rule. It has been in the news quite a bit because Nigeria, as we know, has been plagued by a lot of corruption. As a result, between politicking and corruption, its military has not been able to handle this uprising, and many people have been attacked, as well as hundreds, if not thousands, of girls, including the Chibok 220 or so, have been stolen and forced into sex slavery and forced marriage. With that said, Nigeria is far from alone in having to deal with violence within its country. Another one of our countries that's dealing with this currently is that of Mexico. Mexico is being attacked on two fronts. The first, the indigenous populations of the South, has quieted in recent years. But in the North, the gangs remain totally opposed to the government. Basically, under the PRI, remember the group that held control of Mexico for so long, they turned a blind eye to the drug trade. Well, in recent years that has disappeared, and the drug trade is not so happy about it. So it's turned into an all-out war in areas of Mexico. Despite the current government under Peña Nieto not being totally at the top of its list, the killings continue, and unfortunately, oftentimes local politicians are involved. Ideology here, simply capitalism. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, sometimes violence is a means to gain political power and to hold on to it. Take Indonesia. SBY has been the most successful leader of Indonesia since Suharto and Sukarno stepped down. As a result of SBY's military backing as a former general, he has a lot more strength with one of the largest groups of power in the country, the military. And so as a result, he's been able to keep that peace and prosperity necessary to make Indonesia borderline investment grade sovereign debt. It's been really incredible. Now, two blasts from the past here, Iran and China under Mao Zedong. Both these countries have actually used specifically students as an apparatus in making violence. So in the case of China, under Mao Zedong, he was losing control in the 1960s. So he began what was called the Cultural Revolution. He basically turned all of the colleges in the country into military garrisons with the sole purpose of supporting his rule of the country. It was successful, but the consequences were quite severe for those involved. Many of those students obviously didn't learn anything and have ended up being a burden upon the society. They never were able to pass that point. In Iran, in 1979, Khomeini arriving to overthrow the Shah, he also used students to overthrow the government, and they are a very important element of the violent coalition. As a result, Iran is now a theocracy. Now, students today may not fall into this camp. They often are part of the Green Revolution and other attempts to allow for more democratic change or at least free speech. But at the time, students were very useful in both these countries. So that gives you an idea of some of the violence uh, and its effect on politics in some of our developing world case study countries.